Okay, so we're going to get started now. Welcome. I'm Charlotte Patui. I've got Phil Hurd, my CEO, with me today from MRDC, who's going to take you through this presentation about Snap and online surveys to reporting. So just to let you know, there's a Q&A box where you can ask questions during the webinar, and about halfway through, after the data collection part, we will do a Q&A then, and then we will carry on to the reporting from there. Just to give you a brief summary of what Phil will be doing today, he's going to take you, the program will be starting preparing questionnaires for the data collection. He'll then go on to deploying the questionnaire in different modes, i.e. you can use paper, CAPI, the different devices you can use like tablet, mobile, desktop. Then we'll stop there for the Q&A. We'll then go on to the analysis with the tables, charts and quick counts. And finally, we'll go on to the reporting, where we'll talk about what we call smart reports in Snap, and you can get summary reports. We'll talk about the different other softwares out there and comparing them, free software to online to paid softwares. And then again, during the webinar, you can write in your Q&A boxes any questions you have, and we'll try and answer them all during the webinar. So what I'll do now is I'll pass over to Phil, who is here with us.
Okay, well, good morning from me anyway. It's good morning here in the UK, and good afternoon to many of you who are not in the UK, I know, who are viewing this from around the world. I'd like to just put you onto the sort of steps I'm going to go through today. We're going to, first of all, look at what aspects of online research are important, I think, when you're just deciding what software to use. There's a whole range of software products out there that range from free products through to paid products, through to very high-end and very expensive products that you might want to consider for your surveys. So we're going to be looking at that, and we're going to then look at Snap, the product that we supplied, and look at how that fits into that market and some of the things that it's got, and some of the things I think that are important for you to consider. All right, so let's first of all then talk about where Snap fits in, and then we'll perhaps look at the wider market. Snap's really, it's a tool that's been around for a long while now. It started as a paper questionnaire product for keying in results on paper questionnaires and doing tables. That's its origins. It really has moved on a lot from that in the last sort of 20 years or so. Really, its main core business now is online research or on-the-move research. So by that, I mean people who are conducting surveys either with respondents connecting online through any type of device, whether it be their desktop right through down to their smartphone, or where you want interviewers who are on the move, who are going to conduct interviews face-to-face with respondents, but using CAPI, using probably something like a tablet device to collect that data. The software still does paper questionnaires if you want to key in data from paper questionnaires, and indeed it also has a scanning module that is available if you want to scan questionnaires. So it really does cover quite a range of different data collection methods. We're going to be looking at data collection in the first part of this presentation, and then I'll pause briefly to take any questions that you might have sent through to Charlotte, hopefully answer those before we go on to the analysis and reporting part of the process, because I really want to look at this as a sort of all-in-one type of solution of how you get from collecting data online right through to delivering that to your clients. Okay, so let's start with just talking about online surveys first of all, before we broaden perhaps to looking at other aspects of survey research and Snap in particular. What's the biggest problem with online survey? One of the biggest problems in this day is actually getting people to complete the surveys. There's a lot of people out there now who are sending out surveys for everything you do. I think I seem to get a survey turning up on my phone or on my computer, and it's a competitive business, and research companies have to respond to that competitiveness. You want your surveys to be answered more than anybody else's, because getting sample is getting harder and harder, and people are inundated with more and more questionnaires. And it's important, obviously, that you have the right tools to encourage people to complete your surveys. And I think that really boils down to the fact that you've really got to make your surveys look easy to understand, good enough to look at, but not boring, because boring questionnaires are a real turn off. People don't want to fill in things that are unattractive. So the starting point really, and I think something this is true of Snap and any piece of software you look for online research, it's got to look good. And I don't mean it's got to look outstandingly clever in design. It's not got to look like a clever web page. In fact, it's got to look clear rather than cleverly designed in any way. You don't want a design that's clever that some people might not get. There's been some very good research on completion of surveys, and it's quite common that there's one page on a questionnaire perhaps, or one question on a questionnaire that people don't quite understand what they've got to do, or they can't answer it in some way, and that can be a killer for your survey, because people can just say, I don't understand. All they've got to do is click that X in the top right hand corner and they've left your survey, and you won't get the full data set from them. So clarity, I think, is important. And I must admit, I think there was a move initially to have, when surveys went online, first of all, there was a move to make them look really exciting and have lots of things going on the screen and lots of design work. Actually, people like a clear screen, and I think Snap does that very well. In Snap, you can build your own template so that you haven't got to keep redesigning that. So you can decide what colors you want to use on your screen, and you can obviously change that from project to project if you want to use a client's colors, for example. So templates, getting a template that's clean and looks easy to read. I think white space is a good thing. As people will notice probably that websites have more white space than they used to. The same is true of online questionnaires. Multiple languages, I know for many of our customers, is quite an important issue. It's important that you can run your survey in as many languages as you want to. I know the survey's running in Snap in over 20 languages, and that's all driven by a first question that says, what language would you like to complete the survey in? They answer that just like a typical question, and then it routes through in the language of their choice. So having multi-language capabilities is very important, and all the languages are important, even some of the quite complex languages like Thai, Chinese, all of those are properly supported within the software. Arabic, all of those are supported. So if you've got a multi-language survey, it really isn't a problem. The way that you handle that is by basically setting up a master questionnaire in one language, probably your language, copying all those texts, or outputting all those texts. There's a tool in Snap to do that, outputting all those texts to a spreadsheet, carrying out the translations in a spreadsheet, and then loading them back in to Snap with all the different versions. So a very simple procedure. I certainly encourage some branding, using some corporate colours just to make it look a bit more interesting. Again, I don't believe in over-design. Some shading that makes it easy to follow rows and things on little grids like that questionnaire I think are useful, but I don't believe in over-design. I think keeping it simple and clean is important, and enhancing the appearance just so it looks like a nice clean finish that's easy to read is always a good idea. And things like the last question at the end there, the other, tools such as having a ticking the other box at the bottom there, and that appearing after they've ticked the other so that they know they've then got to give the details for the other. All those sorts of tools are in the Snap product, and I think those sorts of little things are quite important. You don't want a box being there unless someone ticks other and then invites them to write in. Again, I would always recommend having a progress bar at the bottom. There's a temptation to I think, to perhaps not lie to respondents, but to try and encourage them to finish by giving them the impression that the survey is going to be shorter than it is, because if they know it's a 20-minute survey, they're probably going to think twice about finishing a 20-minute survey online. But actually, I think you're probably better by being honest with people and actually making the questionnaire look nice and easy to read, giving them things that encourage them to finish the survey. There's a anecdotally here, there's a very, very good paper for those who haven't done a lot of online research. there's a very good paper written by John Poulston, which if you Google on, I'm sure you can find, who gave a very good paper at SMR about 2 years ago, talking about the length of surveys and what the optimal length was, and actually how you can, people will be more willing to do a longer questionnaire if it's interesting than a shorter one that's not interesting. So you can do some things to keep people's interest, and some things might be counterintuitive even. One example that comes to mind is that grids on questionnaires, we all have grids on paper questionnaires, which are fine for an interviewer to complete and the most convenient way to do it. When that's online, that's quite a boring process for a respondent. They tend, or can have a tendency, many respondents, to straight line and just give the same answer to each item in the grid, and there's a temptation with them to not read the elements of the grid very clearly and perhaps answer it without too much thought. If you give them some other tools like sliders, or to give them cards to sort into piles, it might take them a bit longer to complete, but it keeps them more engaged with the survey. So respondent engagement is very important, and indeed it was John Poulston's paper that actually showed that, that actually a longer survey that's interesting is more likely to be finished than one that's shorter and not interesting. So some things to bear in mind there. Any questionnaire that you create in Snap, you can convert to a paper questionnaire. So if you want to make it look like a good-looking paper questionnaire, that's one that's come out of Snap using some background colours, logos, and so on. So that's all perfectly fine. It does support paper, just as it, in fact, that was its origins, as I said at the beginning. So whether you want to do paper, CAPI, online, or scanning, all of those modes are supported. So here's some examples of interactivity. I'm not saying that you've got to put smiley faces on every single questionnaire you do, but it does still engage people. So this one here is about a theme park. So as the slider gets moved from left to right, the face gets more smiley. And just again, that just encourages people to finish the survey. It might seem slightly childish, but actually it keeps people engaged. It feels as though they're part of what they're doing, and keeps them engaged with the survey, so that your chances of completion are increased. With interactive questions in Snap, you can do other things, graphics, that just make it, again, a little bit more interesting. So as to slide along the number of adults, you could put a box there so they can type in the number of adults as well if you wanted to. But as they slide that along and put more people in the party, the number of people jumps in the graphic there to show how many people there are. Again, it's just something that keeps people more interested in what they're doing and feel as though they're more involved in the survey, rather than just typing in a 7 for 7 adults. You can also use sound and videos with a Snap questionnaire. So if you want to play someone a video, you can do that. You can just show them pictures as well if you want to, or you can just play audio so they can hear something. So all those sorts of tools are available when you come to do an online survey, and of course you can recall them as well. You can make your questionnaire interactive, so you can make a page or parts of a page sensitive. So in this particular case here, we have a map of the United Kingdom with some regions marked in different shades of green, and they're highlighting the area to the left there in blue, which is Wales, a part of United Kingdom, and that has made that sort of interactive, rather than perhaps ticking a box to say that they live in that particular region. Now that sort of technology can be applied to magazine covers, products. So you perhaps want people to say where their eyes are drawn to on a magazine cover, or which items interest them from an index. So there's various ways that you can use that to say what people like or dislike about packaging, for example. You could show them a package and they could click on the bits that they liked or disliked, for example. So you can make different parts of a screen activated depending on what their preferences are. Again, a simple thing to keep people engaged in a survey. You could have made that just a rating scale with very good to very poor across the top. But just by giving them something to do with the mouse, it just keeps them that little bit more engaged and makes it a bit less boring. It takes them longer to do, but the research shows that actually will produce a better response rate, and I think also not to be forgotten, a better quality of result. People will be looking at what they're doing a lot more if they're engaged. If they've just got a whole page there of rating scales, they're not going to look at it, or there'll be a tendency not to look at it as carefully as if they're working in a more interactive way. So always keep that considered. You can make questions have pictures rather than text responses. So here we've got 4 pictures. Again, they could be brands. So if you wanted people to recognise brands of soap powder that they've ever bought, that would be fine. You could give them all the packages and they could click on the ones that they've ever bought, for example. In this case, it's people we're selecting here that were their trainer or something similar. And again, that works a bit better. If you find one thing that can happen is that you might find that on a small device like a smartphone, if you've got a lot of brands on one page, that might not be very easy to view on a smartphone. So you can have 2 different versions of your questionnaire, or 3 in fact, one per tablet as well, that deals with different devices. So for example, this particular one here, on a laptop, on tablet, I think that would actually look absolutely fine. On a smartphone, if there were 12 pictures there, that might look a bit condensed and difficult to differentiate, particularly if it was brands or soap powders or something like that. So you might well use text on a smartphone rather than pictures, as we are on this particular example. So you can vary what people see depending on the device they're using to complete the questionnaire. And I think that's quite a powerful tool to be able to do that, because Snap recognises the device that's being used when a survey is being completed. You can have, one of the tools I do like within Snap is that you can link databases in and out of Snap so that information is pulled through. So for example, here we're interviewing a particular person, or somebody's completing this survey, but we can pull through other information about them. Now that could either be hidden from the screen so that it's not seen by the respondent, but it's just stuff that comes with the data, so that when the data is output for analysis, we knew that David John Smith was male, he was 32 years old, or whatever age he was, and we could use that in analysis. So we could be conducting a survey that's taking sample from a database and linking it straight through to Snap. And what's more, having got data in, we could use that for verification purposes. So we could actually have a question here saying, can I just please confirm that your date of birth is 24/03/1977? If it's not, please retype it. And then that information could be sent back to the database for updating. And indeed, that ability to send information back to a database means that you can actually take certain survey data and pass that on. So let's look at that a little bit more now. So we're pulling in this person's details, their date of birth, and we can use this in other situations where we react the other way and output information to a database. So in this particular example, you'll see the arrow there is highlighting that somebody was dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with the overall quality of the work. That's popped up a box at the bottom which is asking people to actually explain what they were dissatisfied with. So that box doesn't appear unless they're dissatisfied about something. And there's also, you might see at the bottom there, the ability to take a photograph so that they can actually send or upload a photograph of what they were dissatisfied with. Now, what happens when they take that photograph and they have entered what the problem was in that box there, that information can then either be transferred to a database that then a customer service team or somebody can respond to, or it could just be used to directly send an email to the customer service team so that this respondent is called up as soon as possible and the issue is dealt with. So it can really be used as a sort of complete feedback system. I know hotels are very good at this. If you check out of a hotel and the survey was conducted in Snap in a hotel, they find a gold card member who is totally dissatisfied with the service. That information and the reason for their dissatisfaction could be sent straight to a customer service centre so that someone gets in touch with that gold card holder immediately to try and put it right, offer them something perhaps in compensation, and get to the back of the problem, the bottom of the problem that they have suffered. So quite a powerful system here for not just doing survey research here, but actually for pulling data through from a database and sending it back out, either as electronic data back to a database, or just sending an email. Again, we've got sliders here, and having set how many people in this party, we could offer people a discount voucher. So if we know someone's joined in a party of 3 adults and 9 children in this example, that entitles them to a voucher, which we can send with a barcode, for example, by email at the end of the interview or even during the interview. So triggers can be set in the questionnaire to automatically take some action afterwards to send offers or discount codes. So this whole concept of database, survey database, is something that very few online packages offer, or if they do, not without a lot of programming. There are a small number that do, but most of those then get into quite intricate, skilled programming. With Snap, that's a fairly simple process, connecting a database and connecting all or some of the data back to a database. And that certainly works well with clients who are running CRM systems, for example. Here we've got a responsive question. So for this particular question, the respondent has picked 2 stores and then added in a third one by writing it in that's not on our pre-coded list. At the bottom then we automatically get the 3 that were picked as their top 3 supermarkets, so that they can choose the favourite from the top 3. So what the software's doing there is tracking the answers aren't given at the top, and then at the bottom or on a separate page, it's putting up just the supermarkets, or the brands you might call it, that have been chosen, so that the respondent can pick their number 1 favourite. And then, having picked Super Save as the number 1 favourite, it can go on and ask them what's the second favourite from the 2 that are left. So again, some quite powerful tools here working behind the scenes to manipulate and ensure that respondents only see relevant answers. We don't want to give people the full list again, because what do we do if they pick a second favourite that wasn't even in their first 3, for example? That would be obviously incorrect data. One question that often I get asked, and it may be one of the questions that come up in the Q&A, I don't know, is there's 2 types of software that's out on the market for online surveys. They break down very clearly, I think, between scripting, where you have to write JavaScript or something quite similar, versus those where you do the whole thing and we're using a user interface. The one on the right there is Snap. That's how someone sets up a question. What it looks like to set up a questionnaire in Snap. It's very visual. And you set properties for questions. That box that's popped up there on the right there is just setting some properties for that question. So it might, for example, say it's a single response question. Nobody should give the none of these answer and things like that, or you want to refuse that, or you might want to randomize the responses. All of the sorts of tools that you would expect to have on a questionnaire, or you want to randomize some questions, the order of some questions or some statements. All those sorts of tools are in there. So you've got tools to manipulate and restrict what happens within certain questions. You've got tools to set up filters. And one of the things that certainly some of the free products don't offer is really complex filters are available in Snap, something that you won't find in the free products. On the left-hand side, you've got some scripting. Now that, again, is another way that people work. I think to use scripting, you need to do a really high volume of work, and that work probably needs to be at the very complex end of the market. There are some scripting programs out there like Confirm It and so on. I mean, they are significantly more expensive than Snap, but they also need a lot of training to be able to use efficiently, and you'd need a high throughput or certainly a regular flow of complex projects to make that viable, in my opinion. Snap does it all with a user interface. There are some disadvantages to having a user interface. The disadvantages are that occasionally things can become laborious, because if you want something repetitive, you might have to start copying and pasting it a little bit. But I think that outweighs, in most cases, the disbenefits of doing everything through scripts. Certainly in Snap, you can use a syntax to define complex filters, because that's something where brackets, ands and ors can become quite complex. But most of Snap is done through selecting properties and things from drop-down lists and so on. And I think that's the way to go. It really does reduce the number of errors you make in your questionnaire as well, because once you start doing scripting, it's quite easy to make mistakes. So that's a sort of comparison of the two things. We do actually have some customers who do one or two, who have perhaps some projects that are very complex, where they do need programmers to set up the questionnaire and use perhaps something like Confirm It, but then do the bulk of their projects in Snap, because Snap is perfectly good, I would say, for 99% of projects. Let's move on. Complexity does not equal respondent engagement. We've sort of touched on this already, in the sense that I think keeping screens nice and clean and easy to see and nicely laid out, I think, is the way to go. I don't believe in making screens complex or making things difficult to people to understand. You'll always get people dropping out if things aren't clear, so it's important to keep it simple. One thing that's very good with Snap is that you can make it look good on any device. So you can it can look on a laptop, a desktop, a tablet, and it will adjust for a smartphone device. If you want to change exactly what comes out on any of those devices, you can do that, because you have control on how it looks as well individually. It'll do all the work, it'll render it automatically for you, but you can do some fine tuning if you want to. An example of that might be that if you've got a question or some responses with a lot of text, that might look fine on a tablet or a desktop or a laptop. On a smartphone, you can't have too much text, so you'll have to précis that and abbreviate it to something that's a little bit shorter. So you can, if you want to in Snap, say, okay, for anybody answering this on a smartphone, I'm going to have to shorten the text, which risks them not making it quite so clear what you're trying to convey, either in the question or the responses, but it will look more readable and won't mean scrolling up and down a page to answer it, because that's really very off-putting or can cause confusion. So it's important that it looks good on every device, in my opinion. One of the other things that I want to highlight is there's a move to be able to do surveys on more than one device. So there are not many products actually that can handle both CAPI and online surveys within the same package. Snap is one of those, but there's actually a second difference that's quite important to understand. There's mixed mode and multi-mode. So mixed mode means that multi-mode means that you can have the same survey on different devices, but quite often that will mean the data ends up in 4 different files, or if you've got 4 modes, that is, which can be complex to deal with later on. Snap doesn't do that. Snap keeps all your data, whether it's a paper questionnaire, a scanned questionnaire, CAPI questionnaire, an online questionnaire, all in the same file, even if you've got slight questionnaire differences for some of the versions. So, for example, you might not ask people to watch a video on a smartphone, perhaps, because it won't look as good as it would do on a tablet or above. And so you could skip that question. Well, that's fine. You might not ask that question at all on CAPI because it doesn't look right. So, and certainly you couldn't ask it on paper. So you can have the same questionnaire but with missing questions or slight question variations, and have that all managed in one database so that analysis is very simple. You can obviously split the results by the mode as well. But there are some products out there claiming to handle all these different modes, but they don't do it in unison. They're just effectively separate products with separate files coming out at the end. For online surveys, you can schedule when they go out. You can schedule when reminders go out. You can send as many reminders as you want to. You can have the highest levels of security. Snap has the highest level that's out there when it comes to certificated security. So, and I think that's something that's obviously very important these days. It's something that more and more buyers of research are asking for, the credentials of the software being used to ensure it is as secure as possible. You can send out alerts to people, alerts out, so that if somebody's dissatisfied, for example, or wants you to get in contact, they can be contacted. And another useful feature is that you can allow third-party access. So if your client wants to be able to log into the data and see how a survey is going, and perhaps to do some initial analysis, perhaps even, you can give them access to the survey by sharing it with them. They will need a sub-license to do that, which I think costs something like $50. So it's a very low price for a client to be able to log in and do their own analysis, for example. And you get access to a worldwide panel with some beneficial rates there. You can also have your own URL, so it looks as though it's coming from yourself rather than coming from Snap. So that's something else you can add, so that it looks like it's coming from your own website. So I'm going to pause just about here now. That I think, you know, it's important that mobile surveys finally work when you're in even in service black spots, or where the internet connection isn't good. So the way that Snap works, if you're using it for CAPI, is that if you've got an internet connection, it will automatically upload a record or a respondent data at the end of the interview. Whereas if there is a poor connection or no connection, it will store it until you do have a connection later on. So that's something that's quite important for people who are using it for mobile surveys. And that has a very secure system for uploading, which is called an ecosystem, where once it's uploaded it checks back to make sure it has uploaded it properly, so that you don't get this risk, which we hear happens with some products, where records get lost in communication. All right, so I'm going to take a short break there to see whether there's any questions that Charlotte's been having in that session before I go on to the second part of the presentation, when I'll cover analysis reporting. Have we got any questions so far, Charlotte?
Yep, hello. We've got a couple coming already. Okay. One is, how does CAPI work where there is no internet connection or an unreliable internet connection?
Okay, that just sort of come in, I suspect, just as I was almost talking about at the end. Yeah, so that's exactly how it works. So if you've got an interviewer out in the field, if they've got no internet connection, that's absolutely fine. It'll just store it on the device. I should say that data that's on that device is encrypted. So if they lost that or it got stolen, the data would be secure. No one could get access to it. So that's not another security risk. If they did have an internet connection and they had the internet enabled or connection enabled, it would just upload it just like it would if they were online in any other situation. If the connection was poor and it couldn't succeed in uploading it, it would just act the same as if there was no connection, in that it would store it on the device. And of course, the interviewer would see that those records weren't uploaded, so he or she could upload them when they got back to a suitable place to upload.
Okay, I've got another one here, and it's, how effective is the quality control of the online research?
How effective is the quality control of the online research? I'm not quite sure what the question is, but I'll try and answer that the best I can. The quality control, it means that you can, I don't know if this is from the research point of view or from the progress point of view, you can certainly monitor how many interviews everybody's done. You can see what interviewers are working on, all of that sort of thing. So if they're using mobile, you can see that. In terms of quality control, you've certainly got tools that you can use to make sure that the quality of the interview is good. I mean, one of the tricks that people do on online research is, a couple of the tricks that people do is to ask the same question twice to make sure people give the same answer, because if they're just going through it as fast as possible to get the reward perhaps at the end of the survey, you don't want those people. But you can also time sections or all the questionnaire as well. So you could time it to make sure that nobody completes the survey in too quick a time. And that's certainly worthwhile doing on, if you really do insist on having rating scales, you don't want people to get through that too quickly. If they complete a rating scale with 10 ratings in 2 seconds, you know they've just gone tick, 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 tick without reading the questions. And that would be poor quality. So all those diagnostics are in there for be able to see how long people are taking to complete the interview. And there's one other thing I'd recommend doing as well, that you can find out where people drop out on a survey as well. So if you do a pilot perhaps on 25 respondents before you start, you can see whether people stop at a certain question because they don't understand what they've got to do or they're confused. Yeah, there's a few things in there for that. But certainly, if you've got any specific questions on that subject, send them to Charlotte and we'll try and answer them for you.
Okay. So I've got another one here. How do you handle multi-country questionnaires? Do you have to copy the project?
Well, yes and no. No, in the sense you'd have to copy the project. It'll be one project and the data would all be held together as one project. What you typically do is you set it up in one language, which probably be your own native language, and then you can drop all the text out into a spreadsheet. So if you imagine all the text from your questionnaire, the question text, any instructions, all the responses in column A of a spreadsheet, if you imagine that, you then can put the translations into columns B and C of that spreadsheet, or as many columns as you need. Bring those translations back into Snap. Tell Snap that there's 3 languages or 4 languages or whatever there are. Make that the first question on your questionnaire, and then everything is contained within that one questionnaire effectively, and one set of data that you get at the end.
Okay, thank you, Phil. I've also got one more here. Can they run Snap on their own servers?
Okay, that's a good question. I know in some countries people don't want their data going outside of that particular country, or particularly if they're working for government projects or something like that. So that's a very relevant question. It's something that's come up with a client recently. The answer to that is yes. There's a different licensing system for that. You basically, once you've got it on your own server, you buy a server license, and you can run as many interviews and surveys as you want to without paying anything else. There is an installation fee for that, but it's actually very competitively priced. I think, I can't remember the figure now, but it's not tens of thousands of dollars. I know people like Confirmit charge about $500,000 for that, don't they? But it's higher than the entry price for a small license. But yes, it can be done, and it can all be installed remotely on your servers, so that you have everything on your server. You can run as many surveys as you want. Security is your own issue, of course, then. But yes, that's absolutely fine.
Okay. Well, is there a limit to the number of questions you can ask? Okay.
Yes, there is. I can't remember the number, but I know it's a huge number. I've forgotten the figure now. It's something like 64,000 questions, and that's the $64,000 question, isn't it? I can't remember. I'd have to find that out after the survey, but I know it's huge, and frankly bigger than any, way bigger than any online survey you'd ever want to run. So yes, there is a limit, but it is absolutely huge, and I don't think anybody's ever broken it. So I can't remember the figure offhand. I'm sorry.
I've just got one more here, which you've sort of covered, but I'll let you go through it again. So are you saying that you can have different questions on the different devices that you deploy the survey?
Yes, that's absolutely right. So you could decide that, let's say you've got a question. Let's take the example I think I use where you want to show a video and ask people whether they like the video. Let's keep it some simple example like that. You obviously, if you had a paper version, you couldn't answer that because they can't see the video on a paper questionnaire. So that question would be skipped on the paper. You might decide that on a tablet and on a desktop or laptop, it looks absolutely fine, and you'll let them do that particular question. But on a smartphone, you wouldn't let them see that question, so you would hide it from them. And similarly with text as well, if you want to have different amounts of text for different devices, you could reduce the amount of text, for example, on a smartphone, so they haven't got to scroll, and have a slightly more wordy question on a laptop or a tablet, for example. Although I would, I mean, just as a comment here, I always think it's worth keeping your questions as short as possible when you're doing online surveys. The longer they get, the less likely it is that people read them, because people will always skim them otherwise and might miss a nuance within the question. But yes, you can, basically, to answer the question. Okay, is there any more, or should I go on now?
I've just got one more if you've got time for it quickly.
Go on then.
Is it possible to have voice recording of the interview?
Yes, is the answer to that. So you could record voice. You can any point you want to, you can record their voice so that you can capture an actual voice response.
I think that is all of it for the questions now, so we can go onwards now.
Okay, all right. Well, let's move on to analysis and reporting, and I'll move through this fairly quickly because we're down to the last 15 minutes, and there might be a few questions there as well. So let's move on to the analysis and reporting. And I just want to say that a lot of our customers do just use Snap for field and tab, as it were. So they're collecting data online and they produce a set of tables. Snap has a very complete set of tools for doing tabulations. But more and more, I think that's growing. People are expecting a bit more now. Clients like to get access to their data online. They want to produce their own charts online. Researchers want to produce their charts online. So Snap goes a lot further than just giving you some simple cross tabs or some cross tabs or some top line counts. So I'm going to go through very quickly some of the things it can give you. I apologize for doing this fairly quickly, but hopefully from this you'll get a feel for the different things it can get. So I'm going to go through this sort of one by one fairly quickly. So first of all, you can get what I call a questionnaire report. So you can get a quick view of results. You can reprint the questionnaire with percentages or numbers if you prefer, so that at a glance you can see what percentage of people have answered or given each response. And you can do this as often as you like. There's no charge for this. The pricing in Snap is pretty simple. It's a license, and then there's packages of interviews that you buy. There are one or two minor add-ons, but not very many really. It's pretty much that simple model. Running reports and doing analysis, you can do as many as you like. You could run this report every half an hour if you wanted to, or you could give your client a login for $50 and they could run this report every 5 minutes if they wanted to. So no limits on anything I'm showing you here. You could also set things up for automatic updates. So as data's entered, reports are automatically updated. So they're looking at reports in real time. You can apply filters to these things here. So I could produce that questionnaire count there on the right with percentages, perhaps for anybody with 2 or more children, for example, and apply that filter, or run it for females over 35 or something like that. So applying filters, very easy to reproduce that report. It says, as I said, it's free to run. And you can include anything you do here in a smart report. Now, I'm going to come back to smart reports in a minute and talk about that as a separate topic. So let's press on a little bit here. As I mentioned, you can give clients online access. So you can also produce summary reports that are charts as well, and you can drop those into PowerPoint or Excel. But let's get on to what a smart report is. So you can do all these top line counts and charts and tables. A smart report is something like this, more what I would call a PDF document. So this is something that you can produce that's automatically generated out the back of a project. So you would set this up and you can see things like this. So I'm just here highlighting with my mouse. I don't know if you can see it, 73%. So that figure's been dynamically pulled into the data so that it appears in an executive summary that someone can download or view online. And you could do things like you have further down the screen here, there's the target of 73%, or so there's the actual 73%, and there's the target of 50-odd% in that report. And then you've got some summary data at the bottom. So all of this text here is being dynamically pulled in as a result of some analysis that's being set up behind the scenes. And that can be quite complex analysis. That could be a figure off a table, for example, where you're looking at a percentage or a ratio and then dropping that into the report. And even these reports can be stronger than that in their offering, in the sense that priorities for improvement here. So what this is doing, it's not just putting out data and dropping 30% in here on this particular item, value for money. It's actually picking the lowest 3 satisfied answers. So it's pulling through information here based on a ranked table, effectively, so that in the report you can show the areas for the most where the most improvement is needed, and so on. And this text that comes out as a result of that can be conditional. So because value for money's come out here, there's a little paragraph here on actions to improve value for money. So this is getting into sort of quite advanced, I would say, reporting that you just get as part of the standard package that you can offer your clients, or even your clients can build these themselves. So not just sort of churning out top line counts, tables and charts here, actually producing reports that are interactive. You could run these. So say you're working for a hotel chain with 50 different hotels in their chain. You could produce one of these reports for each of the 50, for example, and that could be a fully automated process that would really just take minutes to print off. The setup, there would be some setup time, which would depend on the complexity, but in terms of running it, you could run these reports as soon as the data was ready, or any time you wanted to, midway through field work, or on a monthly basis, for example, if you're running a tracking study. So some really powerful tools in here for smart reporting. Here's some more graphics showing comparative figures and targets and previous months and so on. More of the same, really, but still useful and very powerful stuff. And you can compare each location in the case of a hotel with all locations less that location. So you can see how it fits in compared to others. Very quickly, I'm going to go through some of the other things that you can do here. Charting, all the charting tools that you would expect are in there. So I'm not going to go through that in too much detail, but you can do bar charts, pie charts, all the things you would expect to do. It's got its own customizable charting templates, so that if you want to use different colors or different styles, you can pretty much set that all up for yourself. But that really is a separate topic that I can't cover here, I don't think, in the time I have. You get word clouds as well, so you can use word clouds, which again you could include in a smart report if you wanted to. Any of these things I'm showing you could comprise part of a smart report. You can use word clouds that are color coded. You can output any open text, either just as a simple list like that, or you can get one that's a bit more sophisticated that shows perhaps some other criteria alongside it. So that's quite a nice report that's a bit more useful to end users of this data. You could output, for example, age, gender and location, so that it gives a bit more sort of context to the open answers that were given. And indeed, you can run text reports based on keywords. So you could produce a report here. We have a report on everybody who mentioned parking in the report, and that's come out as a separate report. Crosstabs, I'm not going to go into cross tabulations in too much data here. Again, it's another separate topic, but pretty much all the crosstabs you would want, whether they be summaries, percentage, this is a percentage summary table on a rating scale, a straight cross tabs where you're breaking things by different categories like age, gender, or maybe more things than that. Another type of table with mean scores. Another type of table with some statistics in there, confidence limits being displayed, so you have significance testing being shown. So really a whole set of tools in there for doing tables, charts, reports, with your clients having access as well if you want to let them have access to the project. Obviously you're in control and you can decide whether they do have access or not, but and how much access. You can either let them just view reports that you've prepared, or you can give them full access to the data so that they can produce their own reports. So I want to sort of finish, before I take a few more questions in the last 5 or 6 minutes, with just some differentiators for you to bear in mind before I close out. I think, Snap is above a lot of the free products, and some of the free products aren't free once you start using them to any significant amount of usage. It has got a lot more in it than the free products. The reporting tools that are available, the analysis tools, the data manipulation tools just aren't in the free products, and so they're considerations. And I think it's a lot easier to use than the high-end products. That's not to say some of the high-end products can do some things that Snap can't. With the high-end products where you're programming in Java, you really can make a screen look exactly like you want to, exactly how you want to. So there is a trade-off there, but I think most surveys, a good-looking, clean screen is actually all people want for 90-odd% of projects. The pricing is very competitive. The entry price is just under $1,000, so it's a very affordable piece of software, and that includes 1,000 online interviews as well. So it is a competitively priced product to get started with. One of the things that I haven't even mentioned today, and is not very visual to look at, but actually I'll give you an example where it becomes important. It has a comprehensive data management module. Now, what does that mean? What it has is the ability to be able to manipulate data into the form you want. Now, you might say, why do I want that? But let's say you've been running a survey for the last 3 years, and let's say you run that project every year. What typically happens is the questionnaire changes slightly each year. Sometimes you're lucky and a client doesn't change it, but more often than not, the client wants to add a question, take a couple out, and so on, or change some responses. With a comprehensive data management module, you can recode the data so that it all is in the same format. So if a questionnaire perhaps had 2 sub-brands before, and it's now being combined to one brand because there's been some rebranding, that might be a problem in most bits of software, or you might find yourself dropping the data out into Excel, editing it all in Excel to combine codes together. With Snap, you don't have to do that. You can just tell it what questions and what codes go together, and you can have one master data set from your back data. So that's something that's quite important. And also, Snap has all the tools you need to import data from most formats, whether that's Excel, SSS, SPSS, all those types of things, and output them as well. So data management, I think, is something that's very underestimated. Not a very exciting topic to talk about, but quite a practical one when it comes to really dealing with survey data. I've already mentioned the low-cost analysis license for clients or colleagues. So if you've got a colleague who wants to just do some tables, for example, they just need a $50 license. I've mentioned the full set of analysis and reporting tools, and I mean full set there because I think the smart reporting offers something that very few other systems offer, and certainly not in this price band. Business information tools tend to start at about $10,000 upwards and way beyond that. So for this price band, there's nothing that matches it really. There is a scanning module if you've got paper questionnaires you want to have scanned. It does have the highest level of security settings that are available. And the other differentiator, which I did mention, or someone actually asked, wasn't it, in a question in the interval, yes, you can run it on your own server. So I actually covered that question a little bit late in the proceedings here. So we've got about 5 minutes left before we close. I don't know if Charlotte's got any questions coming in, but I'm happy to try and take them in the 5 minutes I've got. If you've got any others after that, by all means, send them in to us by email to Charlotte. We'll get back to you very quickly with answers. So if you've got any questions, Charlotte, come in.
Yeah, I just got a couple at the moment.
Okay.
It says you said that running reports was free, but do you have to pay to update data?
I'm not sure what you mean by updating data, but no, all you pay for, if you merge data, as I was sort of talking about just now, that wouldn't count as interviews. You only pay for the interviews where you collect data using Snap. So you don't know, for running reports or updating data or changing data because you want to edit it, all those things are just free within the software. So no cost there. Okay,
I've just got one more here at the moment, and it says, can I transfer my data to SPSS for analysis?
You can. It has a full set of tools, Snap, to output a whole range of different software packages. SPSS is just one of those, and you'll get you'll get everything in SPSS so that it's ready to use. I wouldn't use SPSS for doing tables because it's much more difficult to use than Snap, and not as advanced, not easy to do anyway. But if you want to do statistical analysis, that would be a good reason for putting it into Snap, and multivariate analysis. And you literally just press a button and you'll produce an SPSS file, and that will transfer into SPSS with all the data and all the texts ready for you to just use within SPSS immediately. So yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I've just got one more come in if we've got time for the last one quickly.
Yep.
And it says, do you have a quota of the interviews that can be taken for the online surveys per month? And if you do you have additional charges for it?
Okay, the way that interviews are priced is that you buy bundle. You get 1,000 online interviews included. If you want CAPI or more online interviews, buy bundles of interviews. Now they start at a package of 1,000, and they last for 1 year, and they get very competitively priced once you get to certainly to 10,000 or 5 or 10,000 a year. They start to get very competitively priced. We can certainly send you that price list. It's not something that's secret. I haven't got it ready to display on my screen this second. But you buy a bundle for about $1,500, I think it is, and those that you can then conduct those interviews whenever you like within the next year. So there's no quota per month, but you get a package for a year. They do expire after the year, but they get progressively cheaper the more you buy. So you have to estimate how many you think you're going to use in the year. Buy a package that seems to meet your needs, and hopefully then use them all up and buy another package the next year or when you run out.
Okay, that's it on the questions.
Okay, good. All right, well, I'm happy to close there now. You may have some questions after you've left this webinar, but thank you very much for attending. If you have got any questions, just send them through to Charlotte, and I'm sure she'll get back to you promptly with answers. There is a free trial of Snap available if you want to take a trial, so that's something we can also offer. But if you want a demonstration of Snap showing something that's particular to you, or to sort of see it more in action, which I didn't have time to do in this hour, that's fine as well. We can arrange that, and we'll get one of our technical people to take you through. But thank you very much for attending.
Thanks, Ben.